I think in terms of this one, what stung so much is that it really, just visually, I think the idea of the Lake District, which is so quintessentially English, having a mosque, it's to me, it feels quite painful. I can't quite articulate. It's something deep in me that just feels that, no, this is so wrong.
The thing that sticks in the craw of our anti-Western ideologues who run the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust and all of our cultural institutions is they can't stand the fact that it's an Englishman who is the greatest playwright that the world has ever produced.
And it seems that there are 1.2 million people who weren't born here who are claiming benefits in this country, and this equates to a staggering £7.5 billion.
Hello and welcome to Newspeak. I'm Peter Whittle and I'm joined as usual by Senior Fellow Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, cultural historian, by Amy Gallagher of Stand Up to Woke and of course New Culture Forum, and Dr. Philip Kiszely, Senior Fellow, cultural historian and indeed national organiser. Now, we're about to find out more about. I just wanted to actually mention one thing before we talk about the week's issues. That is that next week, next Saturday, we have our very first Locals Conference, which is in Salisbury. It's called Magna Carta and the Making of the English. Rafe speaking. In fact, you're speaking too, aren't you? And David Stark is speaking. Now, I have to say, it is sold out. But the reason that I'm telling you is that this is the first of a number of conferences like this we're going to have around the country, and they've sprung from our locals network. And I mean, you know, I'm so proud of this actually. And I am so grateful to the people who've organised it. So that's next week, but there are other things which you can come to. Philip?
Yes, there are. There are quite a few events coming up, actually. There's one in Manchester today. That's in about 3 hours at 1 o'clock. There's Liverpool on the 24th. That's a Zoom meeting, actually. So anybody's welcome to that. And that's about solar wind and battery storage in net zero Britain. So if you're interested in that, that might be quite interesting. There's a meeting on the 25th of March, which is in Dorset. That's an informal meetup, and there's a meetup in Newcastle on the same day as well. There's a meeting on Southampton on the 25th as well. Lots going on the 25th there, all over the country. 1st of April, April Fool's Day, Sheffield. There's a meeting, and there's a guest speaker there, Paul Selby. There's a tour of the Grand Museum on April the 5th. There's a Brighton meetup on April the 8th. And on April the 13th, there's Norwich Locals, EDI in the NHS, what you need to know. And finally, on the 25th of April, there's a meeting in Beaconsfield, and that's with guest speaker Charlie Downs.
And now what should people do if they want to find out more?
Okay, yeah, so you need to email locals@newcultureforum.org.uk, and there's information on the website as well. You just go onto the locals page.
And all events are free of charge, of course.
Yes, of course. And there were some very interesting ones there, actually. When is the one again in Newcastle, Philip?
That's on the 25th. So
I might try to get along to that.
Yeah.
I love Newcastle.
It's a nice place.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and get along to the Sheffield meetup because it's quite near me on April the 1st. So I hope to see you there.
Great. Right. Well, a mixed bag this week, but as you probably did read in the papers, there are plans for a new, well, some people are calling it a mega mosque in the Lake District. Amy, what's the story?
Yeah, so there was some footage going around on social media of a Muslim woman appealing for people to give money to fund this mosque. They're saying they need money. I think they're being funded by an Islamic Centre charity, and this mosque is going to cost millions of pounds to build. They've already started building it. They got planning permission in 2020 during COVID. I mean, I guess in a way this is just symptomatic of the direction things are going in. I mean, in the last 10 years, over 3,000 churches have shut down. Some of them have been turned into mosques. Obviously, we have a Muslim population that's growing, 4 million, and it's expanding. I think in terms of this one, what stung so much is that it really, just visually, I think the idea of the Lake District, which is so quintessentially English, having a mosque, it's to me it feels quite painful. I can't quite articulate. It's something deep in me that just feels that no, this is so wrong, and it just speaks to more broadly what is happening in the country. Obviously, the Lake District is it's been the inspiration for great literature and the Romantic poets and Wordsworth, and the idea of this, it's an area of outstanding natural beauty. And this site of this mosque, which is quite, in my opinion, quite an ugly thing. Often mosques just don't look right to me in the English countryside. It's quite shocking, actually, I think, to see. And I think people are just don't know what to do with this. They don't know how to express this because, we've got all this Islamophobia laws coming in and we're not allowed to talk about the direction the country's going in. But there's various examples of just Islam kind of coming into our culture in all various ways. But this one really stands out as quite, you just think, gosh, I could never imagine a mosque in the Lake District.
When you say there's something deep in your gut, I know exactly what you mean. It's very hard to articulate without sounding as slightly cheesy or crazy or worse than that. But you feel that something's being done to you.
Yeah.
Yes, I think what has made a lot of people angry about this as well, Amy, is that there are relatively few Muslims in this area. In fact, there's one I read and saw on GB News, one estimate is that there are only about 11 people actually identifying as Muslim in this area. So you obviously have the conclusion that this is to attract many more people?
Yeah, I think this is about planting a flag, really, isn't it? And I just looked on the South Lakes Islamic Center website, and this is what they say. They say, our vision remains unwavering to make the scenic South Lakes a place of choice for Muslim families. So there's something very purposeful there. And if you have a population of people who define themselves very definitely through religion and fundamentalist religion in terms of philosophy and practice, then they are going to impact on their environment because it's not just who they are, it's not just their identity, it's what those identities mean. And if those identities are bullish, as we know they are in places that they colonize, and I use that word advisedly, then this area, which as Amy says is quintessentially British, and which is about quintessential British aesthetic and history and heritage, is going to change because all of our recent history tells us that is the case. And especially in urban areas, we've got lots and lots of experience of this. Where I live down the road from Batley and Dewsbury, but there's also Oldham and Rochdale and Luton. So there's something here, as I said at the beginning, this is about planting a flag, and it's very definitely about planting a flag in a particular place.
Hello, please excuse this brief interruption, but I'd be really grateful if you could please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to our channel. Our mission is vitally important, and we must grow this channel to ensure that our content reaches the biggest possible audience. The best way to do this is for you to subscribe. It's totally free. And in addition to subscribing, if you're able to donate or join our membership scheme, please click on the link in the description or visit our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. We've got great plans ahead, but we can't do it without your support. From only £4 per month, you'll receive a range of perks and benefits, including exclusive content. Thank you. Which is, in fact, Dalton in Furness, actually, isn't it? Rafe, does this grind your gills?
Well, look, nobody's more disturbed by the rise of Islam in this country and the increasing attempts by Islamic factions to assert their dominance over the public space, whether it be taking over Whitehall to have public prayer, whether it be beating their bare chests on Westminster Bridge, whether it be the increasing rise of minareted mosques around the country. I think those are all absolute causes for concern. I'm a bit less animated on this particular topic because, as far as I can see, it's not being built in the Lake District. It's outside the Lake District where this is being constructed. So it's not, if it was next to Lake Windermere or something, I would have a huge objection to this. But, Dalton, in fairness, isn't in the Lake District. The site on which it's planted isn't a particularly attractive site. It's, it's on a busy road, and it's, so it's not actually offending our idyllic idea of English beauty and nature. I also understand that there are actually at least 100 or hundreds, according to the planning application, of Muslims in the wider area who have to travel for 50 miles to get to the nearest mosque, making it a 100-mile journey a day. Now, we can go down the Saudi Arabian route, basically, and say you're not going to build anything that's not of our faith. But then you can't just apply that to the Muslims. You have to apply that to Jews and to, Catholics and to, Sikhs and Hindus and Buddhists and everybody else. So you have to have a choice. What sort of a society do you want? My great concern, of course, is with minarets. I think minarets are an abhorrence to have on an English landscape. The Swiss had a great answer to that in 2009 when they actually had a referendum to ban minarets. And there is no minaret on this mosque. It's not a super mosque. It's only costing $2.5 million to build. My concern is, I think 3 stories is a bit high. If you look at the plans, it's actually shielded by trees and bushes on all sides. There is no minaret. It's got a nice roof terrace on the top. So, we have to admit the Muslim population is rising in this country. There naturally has to be a way to accommodate the mainstream Muslims in church, in mosques. If you don't want to radicalize them, as you probably would if you start banning them from having mosques, my main concern is what's going on inside these mosques, because we know that 40% at least, perhaps half of the mosques in this country are run by the orthodox extremist Deobandis, the guys who gave birth to the Taliban. I'm much more concerned with what's going on inside. But of course, there are concerns that once, what was this, the line from The Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner? If you build it, they will come. So that is also another concern that you have, because, of course, you do want to maintain the integrity of our countryside, and you do want to ensure that diversity doesn't, seep in by the back door. And so that's probably my biggest concern, is if you build it, they will come, and you will suddenly have a much less English countryside. But as it stands and on the plans, I don't really see much grounds for, I can see that it's a much more nuanced debate, let me put it that way.
I'm not sure I agree with you on that, actually. Shock horror, Rafe. I'm not sure I do. Because first of all, there's going to be the call to prayer.
Yeah.
I reckon. This is taking off gradually in various different towns and cities in Britain. The council actually turned down a young kids' school because they were concerned about the noise. Now, are we saying that there is not going to be noise with this mosque? I mean, it seems to me that it is being put, there is a symbolic quality to it, and I think that who are the people, who run the local council, for example? Who are they?
Well, I think this is what I said.
It's a Lib Dem. Sorry, Philip. It's a Lib Dem council.
Right.
But what actually does that mean in practice? Are they Muslims too, or what?
Well, I think what it means is, if they are not Muslims, they are actually frightened of Islam. I think that's probably what it means, because all of our institutions and our culture is generally, that's why Islam is so bullish. And that's what I said before. They're all really good points, and it isn't a huge mosque, but by God, it's 3 stories high, and it is serving somewhere between 10 and 100 people. That seems an awful lot to me. But I think it's this idea, as I say, of planting this flag that they will come. And I think it's about expansion. I think.
Oh, no, and I agree with that point entirely. But I mean, we do have to have a discussion as a nation then.
Yeah.
Well, how do you accommodate an increasing segment of the population? Do you go the Saudi route and ban everything in the future, or do you have to have some way of accommodating and hopefully understanding that most, that these guys who are coming there are going to be more moderate than the more radical element that we see in our urban city centres? But But yeah, as I said before, you can easily limit the heights of these places. you can ban the call to prayer. I mean, we have the ability to do that. We should enact legislation. I would like to see that nationwide, where the call to prayer is completely banned. So there are ways you can ensure that there is no real infringement upon the quality of life of people around. Although obviously, it's inevitably going to happen as more and more people come in.
Yeah, but I think my point is that all of those things in a way don't matter because they won't happen. And what we do in this country is we have a two-tier system, as we see in practically every walk of life. And the rules that apply to everybody else don't tend to apply to Islam. And that's the problem. So you can say we can do this and we can pass legislation to do that. It won't work. You know, you've already mentioned this idea of noise. Okay, we can't have a school, but presumably we will have a call for prayer, and that will get through because, oh, well, it's a religion and they're a minority and they're persecuted and all of this thing. You can imagine, I can place myself in that room and actually hear that dialogue.
I mean, for me, it does feel like it's hard for me not to kind of feel that there's some kind of sinister agenda going on when I see things like this. I mean, maybe I'm being slightly conspiratorial, but you do feel like when something's being put there that's like you said, there's not that many people in the Lake District area, and you just sort of is the expectation that there will be more in the future? Is that what's happening? Is there an idea that are people now kind of gearing up for the fact that we are going to become an Islamic society? Or I mean, and you start thinking, yeah, that's what I think. That's what's
planning
in my mind.
The planning application says that there are hundreds of people within a 50-mile area who have to drive 50 miles to get to a mosque. That's what I'm saying. So, show me the evidence to the contrary of that. But if you have that size of a population, and we know that they are religious, they do have to have somewhere to go in a democracy. So that's all I'm saying is you're going to increase radicalization if you ban these things outright, I would say. And you should be more concerned with what's going on inside them.
There was a story, I've talked about it on Talk TV recently, and it's just a small minor story of the BBC4's The Archers programme, where they showed a story of a Christian character, a long-term character, who decided to fast for Ramadan in order to respect the Muslims in her community. So she's effectively like converting from Christianity to Islam, or at least for a short period of time. And when you see things, I mean, that to me feels like a concerted kind of agenda of kind of something's taking over, something's replacing something. And then when you have stories like this, which maybe there are kind of reasonable reasons and kind of a logic behind it, but the sum total of the whole thing, it's very hard not to feel like there is something is taking over. There's just a general feeling. And even if these decisions are being made rationally, you feel like there is a push in a direction. And it's hard not to feel like that.
Well, no, but that's because there is. I would say that's because there is. I mean, if you think of the past month, what has been the big festival that everyone that you ask will have been aware of? Ramadan.
Not Lent.
So basically, we're there already.
Yeah.
Well, I think if I think about Islam, two words come to mind. One is expansionist, and the other one is belligerent. And I already read out what the South Lakes Islamic Center said on their website. So there is something going on here, but it's, as always, context is everything, and this is happening in a context of decolonization, isn't it? Yeah. So it isn't just, and I don't think the answer is to ban these things, because I think you're absolutely right. If we start, banning the building of mosques in places like this, then it's going to fuel radicalization. I completely get that, but it's the context in which this happens which we really need to address. This two-tier thing on every level, and I have to say, this fear of Islam. If we weren't terrified of Islam as a society, then we could have a proper conversation about this. The problem is the proper conversation is only going to happen around tables like this with people like us.
I agree with you. I think probably where we can find common ground on this is, look, Islam is the greatest threat to Britain and to the West, and because we've had such great immigration from Islamic countries, they have now reached the critical mass, which is the point at which they do become dominant. And the minority can actually assert dominance over the majority, and you're seeing it through things like this ridiculous fixation with Ramadan the entire nation seems to have. Everyone is promoting iftar. I'm doing the daily fasting as well to get into shape. David Cameron was doing it. It's not proper fasting if you have a big slap-up meal after you've fasted for the day. I'll have a very light meal, but you see these big meals there. I don't know why we're all obsessing about this iftar, and all they're doing is not eating for a few hours and then having a slap-up meal. And I think the way that we're all focused on it as if it's some amazing feat of endurance, I think is quite ridiculous. Same thing with with this thing on the BBC with the archers and so forth. But that's, it beholds us to actually make an effort there to say, no, we are going to assert our Christian faith. You don't see that coming from the political class, but that's what's needed to be done. That's what Reform should be saying as well, is that we are a Christian country. We're not going to celebrate minority cultures over the predominant Christian British culture here. But that doesn't mean you have to deny people a place of worship if their population is rising. That's my only issue. Yes. As the population rises, they need to have places of worship. It's a question of where they build, how they build, what goes on, and how intrusive they are with the surrounding areas. And if you can minimize their intrusion and everything else, then I don't see how you can object in a democracy, unless you go down the Saudi route and just say anything that's not a church, banned.
Do another bit of context here on this front is that there are now Muslim sort of hiking groups for the Lake District, and they actually have signs saying Mecca this way. So the people, when they pray, they know which way to point to. That's a kind of little bit of context there. I don't know. I feel that about this rather the way I feel about halal, in the sense that what you're saying is that you either sort of you say blanket ban on anything, Here we are as a Christian country, but a particularly animal-loving one. I mean, almost fetishistically, I'd say. But I love it. And we are, most of us, without knowing it, eating halal anyway now, because it's in all the supermarkets. What do you do there? Do you just ban halal? Because I've noticed this has come back into the news recently.
I think it should be banned. I think there should be an outright ban on halal. Unfortunately,
and
that includes kosher,
yeah.
Unfortunately. And, obviously the Jewish lobby will be very upset about that. But I think you can't pick and choose. The slaughter methods are brutal and inhumane. We had huge protests against fox hunting. The death of a fox is actually a lot quicker and more swift than what you see these animals going through. And I've seen some of these horrendous videos. And we are the world's most animal-loving culture, more laws against animal cruelty here than in the European Union. And the fact that we deliberately turn a blind eye to the brutal slaughter of these animals, I think is unconscionable in a modern caring society. So yes, I would go for an outright ban on halal.
Including kosher.
Well, it would have to be. I don't see how you could do it any other way.
You see, this is the annoying thing about all of this, is that these sort of things were tolerable when they were small amounts of people. So but it's when you get a dominant group, one that's growing and growing, suddenly these things become issues. The church situation, halal, same thing.
It causes intolerance and it causes you to take a hardline position. It's similar to the trans thing as well, that you would have allowed for a small minority, but when they're trying to when you feel like people are taking over, then you have to take these positions where you just say blanket ban. But that's the price of multiculturalism, isn't it? That we have to give up these freedoms.
But also places like Subway, the fast food joint, you cannot have bacon there. In America you can, but here it's all turkey ham, turkey rashers and everything else. So why do we have to change our lives for what's going on?
I think the thing is, as well, is I think you might have mentioned is with this Ramadan thing, is that however many mosques the city might have, it has been a feature of these outside, Ramadan celebrations or iftar, whatever it is, right often in some cases next to a big church, right in the middle of towns. What is this about when you've got endless numbers of mosques, if not to simply display your power?
Yeah.
I think
and
that's
also the kind of weakness of the people who kind of give it permission.
I think that's why the Lake District area stings so much, because some of it, like for me, I feel like that's a place where I could go to get away from all of this, that you could leave the city, leave the mosques behind, and you'd go to that place part of England that was still kind of reserved and preserved rather, but when you hear of this, then you just feel like, is there nowhere you can go to escape, really? And that's what it feels quite.
Funny, I talked to my sister's just been away in Cornwall, Tintagel, had a lovely time and everything. But I sent her some of these stories, and she I can tell she doesn't want to read them. No. Some people actually now just do not want to read them. They know what's going to be interesting. Speaking of absolutely quintessentially English places, Rafe, Stratford-on-Avon has been in the news again, and this isn't actually, I would say, this particular incident, this attack on Shakespeare, isn't one of our kind of you couldn't make it up woke stories. It's quite serious, isn't it?
It's serious, and it's believable entirely as well. So what's happened is, on the back of some nonsensical reporting and research by an academic at Birmingham University, the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust is decolonizing its collection of Shakespeare materials and is actually claiming that Shakespeare's universality around the world is because of European promotion of white supremacy, and that we shouldn't be. And that the problem with Shakespeare is that he's not a global genius, but it's a global genius because of colonialism, and that essentially the problem with Shakespeare is that he perpetuates this idea that European culture and high art is the global standard. Well, I'm sorry, but European art is the global high standard. Exactly. And that's not to detract from the magnificent arts of the Indian Empire, civilization, the Chinese, the Japanese. They've all got proud heritage of their own right. They've got great literary traditions, but yet at the same time, they also appreciate Shakespeare. And it's the fact that you get, the Chinese government actually asked the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust whether they could build a version of Shakespeare's home in China, so beloved is he. They have national festivals of China. Japan has national festivals of China. You had Kurosawa, the greatest director in Japan, making adaptations of King Lear and of Macbeth. Shakespeare is a universal figure because he speaks to those self-evident truths in the human character and the human condition. And this, the thing that sticks in the craw of our anti-Western ideologues who run the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust and all of our cultural institutions is they can't stand the fact that it's an Englishman who is the greatest playwright that the world has ever produced. That absolutely sticks in their craw, and they will do anything to undermine and diminish that legacy and that achievement. And that's what we see. And to see it happening at Shakespeare's birthplace, of all places, a place people from around the world make pilgrimages to, is really painful.
Yeah. I mean, it's just dumbing down as well. So, I mean, I remember 30 years ago, my first degree was a degree in drama at Manchester. And I was taught by someone called Professor Kenneth Richards, who then went on to develop the Globe Theatre with Sam Wanamaker. I was just telling you before. And everybody wanted to do his Shakespeare courses because they were just amazing. Everything from the buildings to Shakespeare on screen and all of that kind of thing. I've been in higher education for the last 30 years. I've seen that completely diminish. And so I've been in meetings with other academics. I've been in meetings with the National Theatre. And when you mention Shakespeare, everybody goes silent. Everybody looks at the floor, and two words always come up, right? And those two words are street dance. Let's do Shakespeare and street dance. And I can't think of anything that sums up the stupid dumbing down and obliteration of poetry rather as much as the contemporary treatments of Shakespeare. And you know what the really tragic thing is? That you talked about Chinese, lots and lots of Chinese students are coming over to this country specifically because they want to engage with our cultural history, our cultural heritage, and particularly Shakespeare. That's the one thing they can't do, because I can't think of any university in this country that actually teaches Shakespeare for itself in terms of its content, in terms of its gravitas, in terms of its heritage. They simply do not do that. They take Shakespeare and they pull it apart. It's the decolonization. And it's absolutely tragic. It's self-hatred. It's self-loathing. It's pulling our history apart.
And I think that they don't do that because they are fundamentally mediocre people.
And they are mediocre.
To really kind of understand Shakespeare and the history and to know it and to know what's been said about it, it takes a long time. And to say something interesting about it or something original is, you have to be exceptional. And to me, this feels like the kind of mediocre people attacking something brilliant, and that's kind of constantly happening in our society, because it's so lazy and easy to just say, oh, I know what I say about Shakespeare. I'll say he's a white supremacist, or he's a racist. It just takes no thought at all, and yet you get attention, you get headlines, and you get ushered in, and people say, oh, well done, aren't you brave? It's just the complete reversal of what should be happening.
You see, interestingly as well, because you know that, as you say, the whole arts establishment is basically sewn up. You would never get, would you, a whole load of famous Shakespearean actors, of which we have many in this country, protesting about this.
No.
That's a good point.
You'd never have them saying, we're getting together, we're very worried about what this means for our heritage and the brilliance of Shakespeare. You wouldn't do it. They'll do it over many other things, but, not this, because they don't want to line up with supposedly the wrong side.
Or you probably get foreign actors doing it more from these other cultures.
Exactly.
And it's also an Anglosphere phenomenon, because, you can't imagine the French doing this with Molière.
No.
You can't imagine the Spanish and De Cervantes or the Italians and Dante. They wouldn't have this nihilistic sort of horsehair shirt wearing thing. And this goes glove in hand with all the efforts to pull down our statues, to rename our streets, rename our parks. This is all about creating, essentially destroying everything that came before to create a new cultural year zero, where again you can fetishize minority cultures, minority art, minority festivals in preference to the mainstream British culture. And quite frankly, look around the world. Asians play classical English, European classical music and piano. You have national Western galleries and museums throughout China, Japan, all over the world. They appreciate the sophistication and the profound nature of European art, whilst also being justifiably proud of their own art and culture too. You can have both, it is possible. But we shouldn't be afraid to assert and admit the primacy of Western civilization and Western culture. We're too embarrassed now to admit that, but Western culture and civilization for the last 300 years has been the world's best and most dominant.
Well, actually, I'd say more than that. I'm going back to the Renaissance, 500.
Yeah, but Western civilization for the last 300 years has been dominant in the world.
Right,
Prior to 300 years, Asia was dominant. The last 300 years, we've basically had...
Do you think there's an element, dare I say, of cultural envy about this? That basically people want to bring down actually what they didn't do themselves?
Yes, I think there certainly is. And if you think about, the 1590s, the 1600s, and we're talking about the most amazing poetry ever written, you have to say, there is no written culture or architectural culture in Africa at this time. And this is... It almost seems as though this post-colonial dialogue is a dialogue between Britain specifically and the West and Africa, and you have to draw the conclusion that there is some.
Well, Saul Bellow, the novelist, American novelist, famously said, probably got him into trouble, if all cultures are equal, where is the African Proust?
Yeah. But in fact, which is essentially what I just said.
Actually, on the TV the other day.
Yeah, there's the reason that there's no Shakespearean Proust or African Proust. And there are 2,000 languages in Africa. 80% of them don't have any written forms, so they're incapable of producing a Shakespeare.
But I think this story, it does show you how vigilant we have to be about this stuff. Because, it was only several weeks ago, everybody was making fun of white privilege. Even Ash Sarkar of Novara Media on the left was saying, white privilege went too far. We're streeting. Labour Health Minister has come out and said, there's too much talk of whiteness in the NHS. And you sort of think, right, this thing's going out of fashion. It's not a serious threat anymore. And then when you see something like this, you just feel like these people, as you say, some of them are just absolutely driven by, envy, something almost pathological, that regardless of whether it's in fashion or not, or whether people laugh at them, they don't care. They will push this unless someone stops them.
I think, as one of the other things was, okay, what do you do about this? Is you say it's a charity. It's Shakespeare's Birthplace Trust, as you say. It's a charity. But I looked into the funding of it, and sure enough, there's our good friend, the Arts Council, giving it money.
Always at the bottom of these things.
What that means is that us, we are all indirectly paying for this. I think it should be shut down. And I think it should take a Trump approach to this. Take away its charitable status, and get people in there who are dedicated champions of Shakespeare. Simple as that. You've got to fight this stuff now. And also get rid of the Arts Council.
Yeah, well, it's it's a drip war of attrition. Every day you get one of these stories, and they just erode our national self-confidence. And the best way to fight back is through our purse strings and wallets. And if you just close the funding, Arts Council, National Theatre, well, National Trust as well, and the National Theatre, Change Britain, all of these places, they are, every time that they put on an anti-British exhibition, they have basically signed their death warrant, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, they'll squeal a lot, won't they? Because they're always, we're meant to be the beacons of free speech and everything, but they're not.
No,
they
they're
don't
not.
they don't do anything about the issues we talk about.
They always wheel that out, and they're not. It's just completely cynical. But it's so grotesque to reduce the most beautiful texts in the world to whiteness and colonialism. And I've taught Shakespeare for, not recently for obvious reasons, but throughout my career, and anyone who in viewers will know this who've done any teaching. There is a moment, sometimes a light bulb moment, when you're teaching young people, and Hamlet, and especially young people who are depressed, who are not feeling great about themselves. That language is just wonderful for them, and it allows them to look into themselves. So reducing this stuff, which is so complex, which is about the human experience, which is about the human condition, reducing it to race is just grotesque.
When they talk about, he's a universal figure, I know what people mean. That basically the genius is such that it becomes applicable to the whole world. However, I won't go along with this thing that, but Shakespeare's universal, he belongs to the world. No. Yeah. He's Western culture.
To us.
And if this were an African writer, you can be sure it would be owned by Africa with knobs on, So I don't go along with that. Anyway, do you know what's interesting, by the way? Our very first report, the New Culture Forum, was on the Arts Council. Yeah. And it was in the days when, it was in the days when they used to engage with us. So I was invited along to this big committee of the Arts Council and everything. It's impossible to think. But we said, it should all be just simply abandoned. It should be disbanded. But the interesting thing is, it was never meant to be permanent. The Arts Council. It was set up John Maynard Keynes. Yeah. After the war, it was meant to be a brief little bridge to help the arts, a bit like the welfare state, help the arts up, like this. But it was not meant to be permanent. Here we are, £1 billion a year later.
It's residual. It's from another era.
Anyway. Please tell us what you think of this. Philip, we've also got another happy story. Which is
games today,
but it's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, this is really worrying. I was talking again. I was talking on Talk TV about this as well. This is about migrants who are claiming benefits, and it seems that there are 1.2 million people who weren't born here who are claiming benefits in this country, and this equates to a staggering £7.5 billion. 7.5 billion. But they're talking about this black hole in the economy. There you go. There it is. 7.5 billion pounds. But it isn't just that. It's the other things that are around it. It's the social services. It's the NHS. It's the education. It's public transport. You can add a further 3.5 billion onto that. So you are talking at the moment £11 billion spent on people who could have just arrived, a few weeks ago, who often have never worked, who've never contributed. And these stats are originally from the government, and the Centre for Migration Control have extrapolated and made sense of them. If you bear in mind that all of this stuff is going on top of the crime stats that were released by the Centre for Migration Control, was it last week or the week before, which said that specifically sex crimes, drug crimes, violent crimes are massively, committed by non-British people, then you've got this very complex web in which the country is simply sinking under mass migration. Now, all of this goes back to that. It goes back to mass migration. It goes back to cost, not just economic cost, but social and cultural cost as well. All the things we've just been talking about. But just to finish the point in terms of economics, we've said before that migrants, if they come here and they're in low paid, low skilled jobs, they are going to cost the taxpayer, by the time they retire, they're going to cost the taxpayer £150,000.
That's the low estimate, I believe.
That's the low estimate, okay, and that's at the time of retirement.
That's at 60, that's a retirement age. If they live to 80, it's 464,000. Yeah.
So you've got this catastrophe. As well, you've got politicians from both sides, from Conservatives, Philps and from Labour, saying, as though this happened yesterday, oh, this is terrible, this is immoral, this is unsustainable. I'm sorry, but this was going on for 15 years under the Conservatives. This stretches right back to Blair. It isn't as though this thing happened yesterday. People like us have been saying this, have been warning about mass immigration for years and years and years. It's just exhausting. It's just exasperating that they talk about it in this kind of way. And now that the plane has crashed into the mountain, now that we are seeing the stats, and now that think tanks are doing things with the stats, we'll do something about it. I'm sorry, but it's too late.
What was interesting about these statistics is when you break it down by nationality, you see that the top nationalities for claiming benefits are Afghanistan's, Iraqis, and people from the Congo, and that they're claiming benefits 4 times more than British people. And it is interesting because when we looked at sexual assault and sexual violence and crime, like in our recent Heresies documentary, it was those same nationalities that were committing sex crimes. So you see that there are these groups are a problem in every area. It seems to be there's kind of a Venn diagram of they're a problem in everything, and there's no spotlight really being shone on these groups in the media. You wouldn't know. Like there's no you don't see politicians openly discussing the issues with these particular nationalities that we have.
Also, you don't get politicians now actually trying to claim that our prosperity is based on migration.
The economic argument has collapsed. Yeah.
What we need are politicians who will say that benefits should be reserved exclusively for British citizens. That shouldn't be controversial to say. Citizenship should come with privilege and perks, come with benefits, literally, if you're a citizen. And currently, if you have indefinite leave to remain, which you can get after just 5 years, you are entitled to benefits. And I'm sorry, we need to either get rid of indefinite leave to remain completely or extend it to 10 years of residency before you qualify for that. Because it's only going to get worse. Because of the Boris wave, because of Boris Johnson's great wave of immigration that he brought into this country from the subcontinent and Africa and elsewhere, within the next 5 years, you're going to have at least another million people coming in. So it's already 1 million. It can double shortly as people who've been here in the last few years become eligible for benefits as well. This is hugely serious stuff, and it's not being addressed. And, in 2013, I checked this up. In 2013, there was an article in the Evening Standard saying that the amount of money spent on benefits in London, 34 billion in 2013, is higher than our entire defence budget.
Yes, yeah.
Right? Now, things are even worse today, but just think of how much money there could be for our other public services, for defence, for everything else. And I think British citizenship should be delayed to 15 years. You should be in this country for 15 years before you get British citizenship. And in those 15 years, you should show evidence of gainful employment and so forth, not being a drain on the state.
Yeah, it's quite a simple thing, isn't it? You can either have one thing or the other. You can either have mass immigration or you can have a welfare state. You can't have both, okay? Ironically, the people who are vociferous and will support mass immigration at any cost also absolutely love and worship the NHS. I'm sorry, but those two things do not work. And you were talking about politicians. Well, they won't mention these particular nationalities or these particular people and these particular kinds of crime. Of course they won't, because if they start talking about that, if they open that discussion, then they have to admit that their whole worldview is upside down. They got everything wrong, and they've had everything wrong for the last 30 years. Where do they go from there? The whole ethos is just rubbish.
Has there been any political response to these figures? I hear people saying what we should do. This is the thing: Reform, Tory or Labour or Liberal.
Well, Chris Philp of the Tory party, as Philip was saying, has come out and said some things. But I mean, he was presiding over all of this for 14 years as well. He was part of the government, key part of the government for over a decade.
No one's said anything meaningful. They have just said the usual thing, which is, oh, this is unsustainable, this is immoral. Yes, it is, and you're responsible for it.
And this is why the argument in favour of voluntary remigration, like the Swedes are doing, where the Swedes are paying something like 30,000 euros as an incentive for people to leave if they're naturalised citizens. I'm not talking about people who aren't citizens, but if you're a naturalised citizen, to get you to leave, to incentivise you, pay this money, because eventually you're going to be costing hundreds of thousands of pounds to keep in this country. If you're a low-skilled migrant, £30,000, and you're a family of 5 to go back to Sudan, you live like a king over there, and you'll save us millions, actually, as a family of 5 in benefits and everything else.
Won't they take the money and just come back?
No, because you have to renounce your citizenship as a condition. As a condition of leaving, you say, I renounce my British citizenship, so you have no right of return.
But I mean, isn't it interesting you mentioned London earlier? In London, it was this is the product, with the fact that we are attracting so many immigrants, it is actually a problem of success. You know, that this is actually, and this is what the BBC used to say as well. Basically that this was all down to booming economy and everything. In fact, it's only becoming clear actually how destructive it has been economically. We usually talk about the cultural side, don't we? But it is extraordinary.
Well, no surprise that this morning it was announced that Britain has fallen 4 places on the happiness index. And we can see evidence of it all around us.
Well, I was going to say, who are these happy people? I'd love to meet them sometime. God, dear. Thank you very much, Philip. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Rafe. We're actually going to carry on a little bit for our members, as we usually do now. But anyway, in the meantime, do have a nice week, won't you? And we shall see you next time. Okay, bye-bye. Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture, and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programs, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries, such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization, and our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals programme, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.